Can I welcome everybody to the first meeting of the Police and Crime Committee in the 2022-23 Assembly year. We will be holding our monthly question and answer session with the Mayor's Office for Policing and Crime and the Metropolitan Police Service. Please make sure that your electronic devices are switched to silent mode to avoid any interruptions. Can I now ask our clerk, Lauren Harvey, if any apologies have been received?
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies have been received from Assembly Member Mohammed today.
Thank you, Lauren. Can I ask the committee to note the recommendations set out at item 2 and ask if members have any other interests to declare? Thank you. I am proposing that we take agenda items 3, 4 and 5 together. Can we note the membership and chairing arrangements, the terms of reference and the standing delegations of authority for the Police and Crime Committee as detailed on the agenda? Thank you. Can we confirm the minutes of the meetings held on the 9th of March, the 23rd of March, to be signed by me as a correct record? Thank you. Can we note the completed ongoing and closed actions arising from previous meetings of the committee and the additional correspondence sent and received? Thank you. Can we note the recent action taken by me under delegated authority following consultation with party group lead members as listed in the agenda? Thank you. Can we also note the Metropolitan Police Service's response to the committee's Violence Against Women and Girls report? Thank you. Can we note the response from the Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime to our recommendations on the Mayor's Draft Police and Crime Plan 2021 to 2025? Thank you. So now we move on to our main item of business, the question and answer session with MOPAC and the Metropolitan Police Service. I'd like to welcome our guests, Sophie Linden, Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime, and Sir Stephen House, Acting Commissioner of the MPS. Good afternoon, both. Very unusual for us to have an afternoon meeting, isn't it? But good to see you. We've got our normal questions that you've been informed of, but before we start those, a number of colleagues just want to ask some questions about the Downing Street investigations. I have asked that they keep it to questions that involve the Met and nothing else, starting with my colleague Unmesh Desai.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Sir House, Deputy Mayor. And can I echo what the Chair has said? My questions, and I suspect those of my colleagues, is about your handling, Sir House, of the Downing Street investigation. And an investigation which, according to the Evening Standard editorial yesterday, raises more questions than answers on your part. So those are the questions that are going to be put to you. And can I also ask you to be as brief as possible, because I've got to get through a number of questions and their colleagues want you to come in. Some of my questions will only require a yes or no answer. So, Sir House, my first question is, can you confirm that the Met is in possession of the 510 photographs taken from events at Downing Street during the alleged illegal gatherings? Yes, thank you. A number of newspapers reported that some individuals received fines for a gathering which took place, actually there were two gatherings, on the 13th of November 2020. Can you confirm that the Met did issue fines for that event, or for both events?
I can go through a list of events where we did issue fines.
No, I'm only asking about 13th of November.
Well, if you bear with me, I need to find the date. Sorry, which was the date?
The 13th of November, the first event, I think, was a party to mark the departure of Lee Kane.
Yep.
And then there was another party somewhere else in the Downing Street building.
Yeah. We issued fixed penalty notice in relation to the 13th of November, yes.
Right. So, thank you for that answer, Commissioner. Can you confirm that the Prime Minister did not receive a fine for attending the first 13th of November event, as a photo that I have here suggests he was there, and that more than 2 people were present?
Sorry, can you just, you'll need to give me the question again.
Well,
sorry.
Can you confirm that the Prime Minister did not receive a fine for attending the 13th of November event, the first event, as this photograph that I have, which has been widely circulated in the media, suggests he was there, and that more than 2 people were present?
Yeah, as you know, we've taken a policy stand.
Sir House, yes or no?
Well, I can't give you a yes or no answer, I'm sorry.
No, it's a straightforward question. Did the Prime Minister get a fine or not?
I've told you, well, I cannot give you a yes or no answer.
No, you can. Did he get a fine or not?
If you let me answer, I'll explain why I can't give you a yes or no answer.
Well, if the Chair gives me more time, then I'm perfectly happy for you to
If you would like to explain that,
I'll be as
then
brief as I can. I'm not trying to elongate it.
No, I know you're not. That's
Our
fine.
policy is we won't name people who had fixed penalty notices
Why not?
because that's the standard practice of the police nationally.
I'm aware of many other cases, both around Partygate, but other investigations where people who received fixed penalty notices are named.
Not by us.
Well, I'll have to take your answer for that. So the Prime Minister did not get a fine. Okay. So if the Prime Minister had avoided fines because only there for a short period of time, what is the length of time people are allowed to attend unlawful gatherings under the regulations?
So again, I would have to talk you through, which I'm prepared to do, what our criteria is.
Okay, so can you then explain, Sir House, how the Met arrived at the decision to not issue the Prime Minister a fine for the 13th of November event?
I can, if you let me go
Yes,
through
please do.
the
Can I
criteria.
just say it's fair for you to give the criteria
Yeah.
and then... But
Chair,
we-
my questions actually
no,
lead
no,
to
no,
that.
well, Sir Steve House has just said he will give us
Sure.
that criteria.
Okay, thank you. I will be very brief as I can be. I won't go into why we looked at retrospective because the previous Commissioner explained that in a previous meeting and the reasons stay the same. So I won't go through that. So our decision-making factors were as follows. Every case was examined. We looked at hundreds of documents, including emails, electronic door logs, in other words, people in and out at various times, diary entries, witness statements, photographs, CCTV images, and we sent questionnaires to people who we felt may have breached legislation. Each event and each individual's activity at that event, how long it lasted, the explanations that were given in the questionnaire were all considered carefully. So we asked how long we were there for, and people told us how long they were there for. We looked at whether there was a prescribed exemption under the regulations for the gathering, including whether it was reasonably necessary for work purposes. And that's an important point. Some gatherings we decided were not work-related, and some we decided were work-related. We also included consideration of the nature of the gathering, different phases of the gathering, and the amount of time spent there, as I said, by any participant. And critically, cross-referencing the evidence to identify whether the individual, on a full consideration of all the facts that we had, including their own account, did or did not have a reasonable excuse for his or her participation in the gathering. This was all because, and I think this is an important point to get across, so that if the case were taken to court, in other words, we issued a fixed penalty notice and it was refused and somebody said, no, I want to go to court, we had the evidence that we thought would give us a realistic prospect of a conviction at court. So there were full files of evidence behind each fixed penalty notice. That's probably all I want to say about that.
So in that case, Sir, I was going to put this to you. Someone who the Guardian describes as a defender of the Met and a veteran officer has this to say. I'm looking at that photo and wondering, why is there not an FPN fixed penalty notice? Another officer also says the same thing. I'm baffled. I think it is blindingly obvious evidence of a breach. The least you would do is to question the individual. If I had to be responsible for the investigation, I would have to be convinced why the photo did not show a breach. Can you comment on what these two officers have said to the Guardian?
I can comment because, unless you're in full possession of the facts that I've just gone through, I don't feel that a proper decision can be made. And okay. I believe that the decisions that my officers made were based on the facts and were proper.
Did you consult with the CPS before reaching a decision not to fine the Prime Minister?
We consulted the CPS on a couple of occasions about generalities in relation to this, never in relation to a specific incident.
Okay, just moving on, because I appreciate the time constraints that I'm under. Did the Met have regular contacts with any officials at number 10 during the investigation, either through regular meetings you or your colleagues may have with the Prime Minister's office or through bespoke meetings?
I can certainly say I never met the Prime Minister
during the investigation. Did any of your colleagues did?
Well, I have many colleagues who
of course, there are many.
Not as far as I'm aware, no. And in relation to this, if that's your inference, in relation to this investigation, certainly not.
Okay. Also, Sir House, it was reported in the Times on the 10th of April that Mr. Johnson told friends that he'd been assured he would not receive any FPNs as a result of Operation Hillman, a whole 39 days before the operation ended. Do you agree with me, Commissioner, that it would be impossible that he received these reassurances from inside the Met Police?
I'm very confident that no assurance were given to anyone who was subject of any investigation in relation to Operation Hillman.
Okay. 3 or 4 more questions and I'll then finish. Would you agree that you should refer yourself to the IOPC and ask them to look into Operation Hillman?
Well, I think that's a moot point now, because a Liberal Democrat MP has asked the IOPC to look at it, and we are in discussion with the IOPC as to whether or not they will take that.
Okay, final 2 questions, Sir House. Speaking to a reputable journalist, and there are quite a few of those, working for a reputable newspaper, according to a police source, he was told that officers were worried that if they issued the Prime Minister with more than 1 fixed penalty notice, it could provoke possibly a resignation situation. Now look, people are human. I totally understand this. Did any thinking of that type, consciously or subconsciously, influence investigation as to whether to issue Mr. Johnson with only 1 FPN, when there's clear evidence suggesting he had breached, the laws quite a few times, or certainly a couple of more times?
So again, without making comment on any individual, I don't believe there is clear evidence that the Prime Minister breached many other times. What you're asking me to do, though, with respect, is to comment on what you're saying a journalist heard from a third party, so it makes it a third or fourth party. It's very difficult to comment upon. Let me respond by saying that I was involved in these decision makings myself. That I am very confident of the integrity of the decisions that were made in this investigation, which was a difficult investigation. I would like to pay tribute publicly to the officers who were involved in this investigation. And I would point out to members here, and I'm not trying to score silly points here, genuinely, I think the last time I was here, I gave enough evidence that I'm not that worried about what a politician thinks of my views.
Agreed.
I'm not particularly concerned about what the Prime Minister thinks. I do my job without fear or favour, as did the Met in this situation.
Sir House, to the person on the Clapham omnibus, it looks like there's one law for the ordinary person out in the street. People got fined £10,000, another law for the rich, the powerful, the establishment, as this photograph shows.
Assembly member Desai.
Thank you.
Yes, and no more of that, please, not to police officers. Assembly member Russell.
Thank you, Chair. Sir Stephen, back in January this year, I asked the former Commissioner several questions which she could not answer due to the ongoing Operation Hillman investigation. That investigation has now finished, and so today, the first opportunity to speak with you since the conclusion of the investigation, I'm going to ask some of those questions again to you as Acting Commissioner. Now, we know from the Sue Gray report that on the 18th of December 2020, a panic alarm was triggered and a police officer on door duty at number 10 responded. And I quote from the Sue Gray report, "They observed a large number of people in the area outside of the main press office and 1 individual giving a speech. Inside the press office, a further 15 to 20 people were present," end quote. So I repeat the question I put to the former Commissioner in January. Was there any attempt by the Metropolitan Police to use the 4 E's approach to engage, explain, encourage and enforce with attendees at any of the Downing Street lockdown parties while they were happening?
So I'm aware of the situation you're talking about when an officer and a custodian were called to I don't know if it was a smoke alarm or something. It was an alarm of some sort, and we spoke to both of those people. And they talked about walking. They were there for a short period of time, responding to the alarm. They walked through a couple of rooms and they saw a number of people. We asked them about their experiences. They did not. The officer, the custodian, obviously is not a police officer, wouldn't expect to. The officer did not engage with 4 E's. No, as far as I'm aware. I haven't read the statement from the officer, but as far as I'm aware, no, they didn't.
Okay, so Londoners, in fact, people across the United Kingdom, will be wondering why the 4 E's approach was not used in that case where a Metropolitan Police officer encountered people partying in a way that was clearly outside the rules that were in place at the time. So my next question that I asked the former Commissioner was any concern raised with you, the former Commissioner, or any member of Met leadership about what was going on in Downing Street while the coronavirus lockdown laws were in place? So was any concern raised at the time?
Certainly not with me, and the former Commissioner has never mentioned any concerns raised with her either.
Well, I think we need to understand at what point the Met Police did find out, because the former Commissioner said to me back in January, I can assure you that we are carrying out our investigations, and if that is a relevant matter, we will find out about it. So are you looking to find out about why the 4E's approach was not used on that occasion on the 18th of December, which is one occasion that we actually know that a Met officer encountered partying in Downing Street?
So what I'm not signing up to is the characterisation you've talked about in terms of the partying going on. I go back to what I know that the former Commissioner said, which was the officers' roles there are ones of security and safety. They're there to protect the perimeter. They're not there to police what goes on inside the building. And I don't believe that the officer that we're talking about felt that they were seeing something that necessarily breached coronavirus regulations.
I think, the Sue Gray report says that people working elsewhere in the number 10 building that evening heard significant levels of noise coming from what they characterised as a party in the press office, and a cleaner who attended the room the next morning noted there'd been red wine spilled on one wall and on a number of boxes of photocopier paper. It looks and smells like a party. The question, though, is so if the 4E's approach was not used, the former Commissioner said, that she was going to look into this. Can I ask you to come back and, in writing perhaps, and explain why the officers in Downing Street who witnessed things were not using that same approach that was used on members of the public? I'm also interested in at exactly what point you, the former Commissioner, or any member of Met leadership were made aware of an officer witnessing the law-breaking party, or any other illegal events in Downing Street or Whitehall.
Well, I'm glad you asked that question, because it gives me a chance to go back to your previous question, which is it's very difficult to put together all these different time frames. So this officer and this custodian were there at a certain time. They weren't there for very long. The event may well have gone on longer. I don't know. Some events, as we know from Sue Gray's report and elsewhere, went on till the early hours of the morning with a changed character in them. And again, this is one of the issues that I sort of hinted at earlier, which is, sorry, I'm going somewhere with this. One of the things we had to decide was, is this gathering, is this event work-related or not work-related? And that was an important question asked. I think it's impossible to expect an officer walking through a room with a lot of people in it to work out whether or not these people are breaching coronavirus regulations when it's taken a team of 12 experienced detectives many, many weeks to do the same thing. We can take evidence from that officer, as indeed we did, and I can write to you, as you asked, about what that evidence contained.
Thank you. I do think, though, that the rules in place at the time were that gatherings of 2 or more people indoors continued to be prohibited unless an exception replied, and it's quite hard to see an exception for the numbers of people that were being described.
Sorry, it's not work. That's the point. Work-related is an exception. So the question is not how many people. The question is, what were they there for?
People were meant to be more than
Did they have a reasonable excuse? Could we have had a conviction in court, or would they have heard a reasonable excuse? We were there for a work-related event. That was the thing that our officers have looked at over the last few weeks.
Now, there was a third question that I asked the former Commissioner, and Chair, with your permission, I would like to just to ask this one. So I asked the former Commissioner, are you worried that the apparent lack of investigation of the mess in Downing Street might be further damaging trust and confidence in the police? Now, people across London, across the UK, were making huge sacrifices at this time, and the Met Police are meant to police without fear or favour. But what it looks like is as if the Met have been turning a blind eye to these events in Downing Street. So are you confident that the Met are able to police without fear or favour?
Yes, I am. And can I point out several things? Firstly, we've issued well over 120 fixed penalty notices in this event. So that's not doing nothing. And I'd also remind you that police officers put their lives on the line during COVID. So we're well aware of the suffering. Most police officers and police members of the police family suffered exactly the same as the public did. And we were at work the whole time. Some of my officers were picking up bodies of people who died of COVID, working alongside the So please don't think that we are not aware of the suffering involved.
I'm very aware
Well,
that you
right.
are aware of that, but what the public are experiencing is seeing more and more photographs which look absolutely shocking. I'm quite sure that Metropolitan Police officers were not indulging in parties like that.
I accept that many of the photographs that we are seeing look bad, and Sue Gray's report has dealt with that. We deal with the law, not what looks bad. And just because there is alcohol present, can I just remind people that the COVID regulations are about breaching COVID regulations. They're not about whether there's drink there or not. We have to put fixed penalty notices to people that we think will win in court. And there has to be evidence behind it. And there is not always evidence. And what looks, a photograph can be somewhat deceptive in these areas. We need evidence, and they need to be proving there is no reasonable excuse behind what was going on.
Okay.
We have not, I repeat this, we have not shied away from issuing a fixed penalty notice where we thought it was deserved. We have policed without fear or favour, and I would not have presided over anything less than that.
Thank you. Right, if we can move on to Assemblymember Pigeon now.
I've got two specific questions for you, Sir Stephen. Thank you for outlining the decision-making process for issuing the fixed penalty notices. I think it was helpful to have that clarification. There are reports that some senior staff simply didn't answer the questionnaires that were issued to them by the Metropolitan Police, and then they have avoided being fined. Can you clarify that everyone who was sent one of your questionnaires returned it and you were able to use that as part of the decision-making process?
We did not simply get put off if somebody didn't return the questionnaire. I mean, I would say that was possibly a spur for more work, not less. So yes, if people were pursued. I think the vast majority did return questionnaires, and the vast majority of people have paid the fixed penalty notice.
Lovely. No, that's helpful clarification as part of the process. My second question, which is one that I did ask the former Commissioner about, is whether you're able to give us an update, please, on the investigation into the party at Conservative Party headquarters on the 14th of December 2020, and whether you can update us how many of the 24 individuals have been issued with either fixed penalty notices or interviewed, given that we were under Tier 2 regulations at the time. And the last comment I've seen on this is that the investigation is ongoing.
I can confirm that it is ongoing, and that may seem strange, and I acknowledge that may seem strange to people because it was dealt with. We sort of started dealing with it quite a while ago. It's become a more complicated investigation. So whereas in the Downing Street and Cabinet Office situations, we sent out questionnaires and they were returned pretty quickly, and we could proceed. That hasn't proceeded as smoothly as the Downing Street one, hence the longer time. So it is still under investigation, but I'm very happy to undertake here, as soon as it is completed, to update you by letter if you wish.
That would be very helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So Steve, can I just ask you, do you find it helpful when the Mayor, as the Police and Crime Commissioner, asks questions or is seen to question operational decisions in public?
Well, obviously the Mayor has a role to play in this. We have actually responded to his letter just earlier this afternoon, and I think what's in the letter that I've responded with is basically what I've read out here to you, with also I think the explanation, which I didn't give you, about the retrospective, because the previous Commissioner's already given you that, and it's already in the record. So in some respects, actually, it has been quite helpful because it's allowed me to write to him, and we put that letter onto our intranet site so that Londoners can read it as well.
Okay, well, it's good if everybody does. Right, now we're going to the the business of the day as was agreed. So I will start the questioning and I'll ask you, Sir Steve House, will the Met be publishing a full and detailed response to the recommendations raised in Her Majesty's Inspectorate report on the Met's counter-corruption arrangements and the Daniel Morgan Independent Panel report?
Absolutely, we will. As members, I hope, are aware, we fully accepted all the recommendations of the Daniel Morgan Independent Panel. There were 9 that are directed specifically to the Metropolitan Police Service, and we accepted all of those. We did actually reply in March 2020 with a 45-page summary. It's a long summary, I get that, accepting all 9 recommendations and outlining how we were moving ahead with this. And again, on the HMIC FRS counter-corruption inspection that reported on the 22nd of March, we've fully accepted all of their recommendations. There were 20 recommendations, 5 causes for concern and 2 areas of improvement. We've accepted all of that, and we can certainly provide members here with a full record of all of our acceptance and the actions, far more importantly, that we've taken in response to the recommendations.
Yes, we'd be grateful for that because we were very concerned, as I'm sure you were when you read the report. Deputy Mayor, are you content with the Met's response to the report on the Daniel Morgan Independent Panel and the HMI inspection, and how are you assured that it is taking appropriate actions to put this right?
Yes, I mean, there's two responses.
Sophie, sorry, can you start again because the mic?
Apologies, I'm out of
right.
practice. Yes, there's 2 things. There's the publication of the response to the Daniel Morgan report and then the acceptance of the inspectorate's recommendations. In terms of what MOPAC and myself and the Mayor will be doing is just in line of our duties and responsibilities of holding the MPS to account, we will be having oversight in terms of the delivery of those recommendations. We'll be doing a deep dive later in the year to make sure that has, to see what progress there has been. And the MOPAC officer sits on the internal board of the Met that is overseeing the implementation of the recommendations.
Okay, and when's your first timeline for them to make sure that they're looking into this properly and that they're putting things in place?
So some of the recommendations are meant to be completed, I think, by July. So I have asked for an update by the end of July as to progress on all of the recommendations, and particularly those that are meant to be done in quicker time.
Okay, I'm sure we'll be coming back to this. Thank you. Assembly Member Garrett.
Afternoon. If I could ask you first of all, Deputy Mayor, about the HMI CFRS report following the Daniel Morgan case. One of the findings was that the Met's approach to corruption was not fit for purpose. There was quite a lot of detail behind that, and I just wondered what the MOPAC are doing to bring the Met up to scratch on that.
I think it is fair. I think it is also fair to say that the HMI CFRS report made comment on the Met's ability in terms of reactive anti-corruption was extremely good and once it came to light, but the proactive anti-corruption was not fit for purpose. Again, as I said to the Chair, this is about oversight of the Met, so I will be holding the Met to account through my oversight board, but also the audit committee, which is a joint Met-MOPAC audit committee, also receives report around corruption, anti-corruption, and will also be having, making sure that the recommendations in the HMIC report are delivered. The really important thing is not just that the recommendations are delivered, but actually that we need to be able to show the impact of that being delivered, and that there is a step change. I know the Met has already made progress on some of the recommendations. For example, the declaration of business interests. I believe there's been thousands of face-to-face conversations with officers, which has resulted in more declarations of business interests being registered, which is a good thing, and we will continue to have an oversight of each of the recommendations.
I mean, one of the concerns they raised was about, I mean, you're right, there was some good, but obviously time is limited, and we can't spend couple of hours here this morning just telling everyone how wonderful they are. So one of the concerns was about officers being recruited who had criminal connections, so associates, family members, and so on who were sort of known criminal. And what the inspector pointed out was that it may be that the decision to hire those individuals was sound, and we don't necessarily deal in guilt by association, but then there wasn't a process to make sure that decision was sound. It's obviously a risk if someone has those connections. How is it? I mean, I take the point that lots of good things are now happening, but how is it that it seems to have taken this for such what seems to me quite an obvious thing to be done? So probably actually to Stephen, yeah. It's sort of an operational question, I suppose. That
no, it's fine. So yes, I recognise exactly what you're saying. I would just re-emphasise. I didn't go into it in my previous answer, but we're doing an awful lot already in relation to this. So it's not that we're waiting for anything, or I can talk to you about what we have already done. In relation to that one particular issue, there are always areas where we don't always agree with the HMI report, and they seem to be quite concerned about the fact that we were taking on individuals who either had family who had criminal convictions, or indeed themselves had brushes with the law years gone by. That was not a careless decision by us. We reviewed it very carefully, and we decided that we wanted to give some people a second chance. Normally, obviously, criminal convictions mean you won't get into the Metropolitan Police Service, but there are some occasions where, because of time or because of very, very low-level criminality, we will bring some people in. I think the concern from the HMI, and this is valid, is yes, but what are you doing to make sure that these people are staying on the right side of the law? And I think at my last meeting I expressed some concern about that, because if we thought they were a risk, we shouldn't take them in. We're saying, no, we don't think these people are a risk. Therefore, putting in extra measures to watch them, in inverted commas, I think is rather insidious, to be honest. What we need to do is make sure that everything that we've already alluded to is in place. So gifts and hospitality, second jobs, associations are all being properly monitored, and they are now being properly monitored. We also need to make sure, and one of the big criticisms, why they said they didn't think it was fit for purpose, was the centre, which is the centre of excellence and does the real reactive stuff very, very well, was not talking to the BCUs, where the units are based, who will do more of the low-level stuff. We're fixing that through better communication, and we're looking at a restructuring to put everything under the command of the centre, so that one of the criticisms was intelligence wasn't flowing backwards and forwards effectively, and we're working to fix that. The other big thing I'd want to mention, of course, is we were criticised for not having an IT solution to this, that many forces had web crawlers and various other devices that would, and software that would check emails, check messages on Metropolitan Police mobile phones, not personally owned mobile phones, for keywords and also strange behaviour. We are actively seeking out that solution. We've actually found not that many forces have a very sophisticated process, to be honest, but we will be asking MOPAC to fund something, many millions of pounds, that will put us at the front of that sort of effort. So we are working. We've also reinforced the number of officers we have within our Directorate of Professional Standards to do more work to try to spot bad behaviour, aberrant behaviour early.
You've mentioned one of the things I was going to come on to, actually, so I'll flag that up. I mean, the bit in there about the gifts and hospitality recording seems to, I suppose, the polite way of phrasing it would be a mixed bag, but the sense that I get was that there were places, perhaps, as you say, maybe parts of the Met, not the central part, where the recording of gifts and hospitality was just seemed to be somewhere between an afterthought and slightly chaotic. And again, that's quite a basic thing. Those of us in public life, it's a normal thing to record if somebody buys us, something quite extravagant, and on that basis we would then refuse it because it obviously would look very bad. And so it seems a strange oversight that the police were not already doing that.
Yes, and forgive me, this is one of the places where I take issue with the report itself. The report was obviously a follow-up to the Daniel Morgan independent panel. The Daniel Morgan independent panel was looking at the murder of Daniel Morgan and our activity since. He was murdered in 1987. So the HMIC report sort of gives the impression that the Gifts and Hospitality Register hadn't been any good across the Met since 1987. I'm afraid that's simply not the case. Yes, it was in the areas they looked at, they found some good and they found some not very good at all, and some pretty poor behaviour, and we accept that and we're fixing that. But the concept that seemed to appear in the report was, it's never been any good since 1987. But that's just not right. And I was in the Met in the early 2000s, and these things were rigorously looked at by our own internal inspectorate. So I know that we've fallen off. There's no doubt about that, and it's deeply embarrassing for us that we have.
I'm very conscious of we've used quite a bit of time already on the Partygate stuff. I think what I would say is that if you've got an anti-corruption system that's good in parts, then you haven't got a good one. And if you've got bits of the organisation where it's not being recorded properly, then those are the bits maybe where there is corruption and you would need... I mean, personally, if I deliver some leaflets for my election, I have to record how much I spent and where they came from and produce invoices that anyone can check. So that's completely normal. And it just seems that whole bits of the Met, or maybe sub-bits of it, particular units, weren't doing it. And I think you know, personally, the fact that it wasn't happening uniformly everywhere, I think, is a problem, even if there's good practice in some places.
I agree, and we're fixing it.
Okay. The other thing related to this, I think that I did find quite worrying, was property, cash, drugs in particular, which seemed to be evidence collected, you know, in the course of investigations that was either not stored securely or disappeared. I mean, again, that seems like quite a basic thing that the police should have had sorted out decades ago. So what's the story there?
Again, sorry, you just give me that hook back in again. We did have it sorted out decades ago. Okay. This is not a suggestion it's been wrong for the 35 years since Daniel Morgan was brutally murdered. I think where we've gone is we've been overwhelmed. We take in hundreds of thousands of items of property every year. We've carried out, since March 22, we've carried out an Operation Sweep across the organisation to identify where property is insecure and fix the management of it. Initial findings have found several thousand items of property that have now been sorted out and properly recorded, and this will now be conducted quarterly so that we are fixing this problem going forward. And we'll have to put more investment into it, because the property takes up space as well, and as we know, space costs and is an issue. But we realise this has to be done. But the volume that we take in, any one of our BCU property stores will have more property in it than your average county force will have. It's a volume issue, and it's one where we failed and we need to fix it.
Just can I clarify then? So I understand that there were, I think, amounts of cash. You know, I mean, we're not talking about, you know, a £5 note. We're talking about substantial amounts of cash. And amounts of drugs that were collected. So how long ago are we talking that this problem of those things being lost or going missing or not properly tracked? I mean, because there's two problems. One is the obvious possibility of corruption, that officers, they mysteriously disappear. And then the second problem is the chain of evidence, that eventually a case goes to court and collapses because you can't establish the chain of evidence. So how recently are we talking about those kinds of problems that the report mentions?
I think that's impossible to say, because it will vary. But what I would point out is that the report did not go on and make the link to say cases have collapsed and there are corrupt officers. It simply said it's a bit of a mess, and often it was. And often the picture that I would put is, you know, we have locked doors where our property stores are. There was some chaos behind those locked doors. But there wasn't property lying, you know, we didn't have drugs lying around the police station, as it were, in offices. It's in the property store. It's just not been properly logged in and stored effectively. And I think that's what we're now fixing.
Yeah, I suppose what I would say is, you know, the human nature is that where there's chaos, that's where criminality thrives, isn't it, within the police or outside? So I think that's the reason why we would want to see it. And I'm sure you would want to see it.
Absolutely.
So
we're in agreement.
The fact that we don't have evidence of people pocketing it doesn't mean that we shouldn't have a worry that...
we are worried about it, which is why we're doing something about it.
I've got to ask you both, actually, this final question about Operation Drayfern, which is that came out of the original Daniel Morgan inquiry. How is that going on in terms of rebuilding trust with the sort of cross-cutting themes that came out of that report? If I start with you, Sir Stephen.
Drayfern is well underway. As I said, we've already produced a 43-page document which outlines the recommendations and what we're doing about it. And I'm very happy to let you have let you see all those activities. It was quite a wide-ranging report, as you say, but for example, it looked at the role of family liaison officer being combined with the senior investigating officer for parts of the Daniel Morgan case. So we reviewed every single homicide for, I think, 10 years. That's never happened before or since. It was a very, very unusual set of circumstances based on personalities, frankly. And it's never happened before or since. We've looked at other issues like the family, like the homes situation. Again, that was a unique situation in relation to this. We haven't found any repetition of that. Same with the SIO working for another organisation, not being a member of the Metropolitan Police Service. Again, unique circumstances for Daniel Morgan. It's never been found in any other murder investigation since the Daniel Morgan, as I say, 35 years ago. Some other areas, I think there were 23 or 24 recommendations. 9 were for the Met. There are a number for the Home Office, a number for the College of Policing, and also nationally. And we are still working with a lot of other agencies to make sure that nobody drops the ball on any of these recommendations and that we push forward on all of them. But as I say, I can let you have a detailed report into all of that.
Thank you. And Deputy Mayor, what were your thoughts on the Drayfern, Operation Drayfern, and how that's feeding into the rebuilding trust process?
I think it's similar to what the Acting Commissioner said, is that both of the report's recommendations have, and as he said, they're not all for the Met, the Daniel Morgan Independent Panel report, have been, have the oversight from us at MOPAC. Officers from MOPAC sit on the various internal boards in the Met, bringing those together, and there is also a reference group, including the London Policing Ethics Panel, to look at the sort of cross-cutting issues around transparency, trust and accountability. And I think one of the big issues is really, for me, in terms of the themes, is of course, well, possibly two, is obviously the anti-corruption issues, and trust and confidence will flow from knowing that the actions that Sir Steve has outlined are going to have an impact. And the second thing is about openness and transparency. And we've talked a lot at this Police and Crime Committee in various meetings around transparency, accountability, and Sir Steve has previously accepted that the Met can be defensive, and it's those themes are ones that we are continually going back to see, has there been progress, is there more transparency, better engagement and accountability, and then of course there's the anti-corruption, which are very specific to the HMIC report.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Apologies, Assembly Member Pigeon, some of yours has just been asked. If you'd like to ask the rest of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I wanted just to pick up on Operation Drayfern because the team engaged a number of academics who applied an established theoretical model to the concept of what institutional corruption is and provided some commentary on the findings, which you included some of it in your response to the report. Will you commit to publish the full findings and analysis conducted by the academics?
I thought we had, but if we haven't, I'm very happy to. Yes.
Lovely. Okay, thank you. I don't think it has been in full.
Okay.
I've got a few questions I wanted to pick up from this report, and I have to say I don't read it as a report saying that everything in here is what's been going on since 1987 at all. I see this as a snapshot of what they have found in response to things in the past at this point in time. Now, in the report, so the Commissioner at this committee on the 21st of July 2021 stated that we do comply with or exceed all standards set by the College of Policing in APP. So this is around vetting. Yet this report is very clear that there are 3 respects in which the MPS doesn't comply with or cannot be sure it complies with the vetting APP. So can you clarify for us what is going on with vetting, and can you also address the fact that our committee was misled by the previous Commissioner by giving us wrong information on whether you complied or not with the standards around vetting?
So you said you were talking about Drayfern, but
I've moved on. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
I think
I've got a list of questions around vetting.
I missed that as well. Yes, on vetting. Well,
sorry, page 108 of the report.
Okay,
it's
fine.
very clear that the Commissioner claims that you complied with or exceeded all standards around vetting, and it's quite clear that the HMI says there are at least 3 respects that you don't. And I'd like to know whether you could clarify that, and whether you want to comment on the fact that the committee was given misleading information.
Well, I'm quite confident that if she misled you, she didn't mean to mislead you.
I'm sure.
Sometimes briefings could be wrong, and part of the reason I'm saying that is I'm looking at my briefing entitled Compliance with College of Policing Vetting APP, and it says the MPS is compliant with the College of Policing Vetting APP. So I will be accused of misleading you as well, potentially, and I'm doing so on the basis of the briefing that's in front of me. I'm not trying to be glib or
No, you're not at all. But it's
gloss over it. But I think we do believe that we comply with it. We are doing a lot in vetting, so we have again put more resources into our vetting. We have put more training into the people that are in vetting already. We've got a business continuity plan in there as well, and there's been an awful lot more focus, as you would imagine, for a variety of reasons, not least the Wayne Couzens situation in relation to how we go about our vetting. There's an innovation project to make sure that we are up to speed nationally, and we've appointed a project manager to run that. And we're also looking at upskilling the IT and improving the IT that's in there as well. I can go away again and check around the compliance piece, because it's obviously a piece of contention that we need to get to the bottom of. I don't have enough of a briefing on that, except to say that we believe we are compliant.
Yeah, I think it would be very useful, because we are named in this HMI report. I understand this is one of several examples that could have gone into this report. And this does say they requested a copy of the Commissioner's briefing note before the committee, and it was open to a degree of misinterpretation. So I would like you to go and look to make sure that what's in your briefing note when you come to us, or future Commissioner, is accurate, so that we get the right information.
Of course, yeah.
Lovely, thank you. I wanted to pick up the issue of storage practices. Obviously, my colleague has already started on this area. But when you read the report, what struck me was how inconsistent this is right across the Met, that one borough might have really good practices and good storage of all evidence, and in others it sounds like that, you know, your messy understairs cupboard, quite frankly, when this is evidence that you need to be able to prosecute cases and hopefully be successful. Perhaps you could explain to us why there is this difference. I mean, it was described as dire in the report from HMI. Do you accept that? And what are you doing? Because it seems to me you don't even meet the sort of national standards, whether it's College of Policing or whoever it is, the national standards around storage and securing evidence. So what are you doing to make sure that right across the Met, wherever you are, that evidence is being stored securely, including firearms was the one I was worried about. Firearm fell out of a cupboard. I mean, that's frightening, really.
Well, in relation to the firearm, yes, but it would have been made safe before it was in the property store. So if it's fallen, that's obviously not great. But firearm coming into the possession would have been made safe by a firearms expert. So not inherently.
They said that some hadn't been checked to ensure they were safe. That's what it says on page 52.
Okay. Operation Sweep I mentioned before. It was launched in March 22. So not long after we got the HMI report. Across the whole organisation, so try and overcome the issue of inconsistency. As I said, it's found many thousands of items that have now been properly stored and recorded. We've got professional standards have been involved in this, as you might expect, and we've had a number of officers and staff been given some reflective practice and referred into misconduct processes as well. It will be conducted every quarter, so the next one will be next month in June. We've introduced a new property policy for the supervision of property and escalation of processes of non-compliance up through to senior management on the BCUs. A property governance tracker has been established on each BCU as well, and in specialist crime and in the Grenfell investigation to adopt a standard governance process. So again, the theme of consistency coming out there. And we're putting in place we're trying to use technology and putting in place a power app to allow staff in there to track property more effectively. Target of that is an implementation date again of next month. Property Services have been tasked to establish a common standard of security for property and transit stores. You'll remember the incident in the report where they said that they found the keypad had got the number to the keypad written underneath. It turned out it was an old number anyway. It wouldn't have worked, but nonetheless, ridiculous that was the case. That has been looked at, as I say, by Property Service to make sure we get a common standard, and will be part of the uplift of all the BCU buildings that we're going through. A monthly exhibit steering group's been set up with a lead from the right part of the organisation, so that we're keeping an overview of this. One of our commanders leads a goal group for an immediate response into the property risks to deal with all of the things that we've found so far. And we are now putting in place performance and management information in relation to property storage, which will go to our main frontline leadership meeting every month. They meet every month to look at performance, and that's going to be included in the performance pack to make sure that we're focused on property storage as well. So I think we put a lot of management rigour and grip into this. We're putting some technology into it as well. We've put some discipline into it as well, so people realise they have a job to do and they'll be held to account to that job. So I think we've put in a pretty comprehensive response, but we will be checking this as we go forward every quarter, as I've said, under Operation Sweep, to make sure that it's having the desired effect.
That sounds like a really comprehensive package. Did you say in that, I may have missed it, that you've increased supervision as well? Because that was one of the other criticisms, that they lack supervision in that area. Yeah,
it's now on the radar quite clearly. If it's on my radar, it's on other people's radar. It's on the radar of the BCU commander and the senior leadership team on the BCUs, and in specialist crime, and in Operation Northleigh on Grenfell as well.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, are you confident the Met can now keep investigation materials information secure? Are you happy with this? Sounds quite a comprehensive plan that Sir Stephen has just outlined.
So as with all the plans, it depends on the delivery of it, and then depends on the keeping to the plan, the delivery, and then the impact. And as I think Sir Steve will always would testify, that's always my question: is, well, what's the difference that this plan has made, and how are you assessing that? So that it's, yes, I'm confident there's a good plan in place. We've got to make sure, there's oversight of that, and also the Met can deliver it in the way that I know that they've got a grip of it at the moment. But it is about the impact and the change
and continuity of it. One of the things that came across in the report was that this area around storage was on the Met Police's risk register. How often do you look at that risk register, Deputy Mayor? And is it something that this committee could have a look at, please?
The risk register goes to a risk and assurance board that MOPAC sits on, and then it goes up to another sort of iteration to the audit committee, which is independently chaired. So that is where the real detailed work takes place on that. Those papers, I believe, are public.
Okay, it'd be useful if we could receive a copy.
I can double check that, but I believe they are.
Lovely, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah. Somebody decide, did you still want to come in on this?
Yes, Chair. Just two questions. I don't think the first one has been answered. Sir House, the Daniel Morgan inquiry panel reported some difficulties in their working with the Met, stating that, and I quote, "The panel did not experience, particularly from the Met, the necessary level of cooperation," unquote. The inspectorate agreed, saying, quote, "Arrangements must be made in future to ensure that any panel has timely access to the material required to do its work," unquote. How has the Met progressed its recommendation specifically, and how is it ensuring that future panels will have an easier working relationship?
So thank you. Yes, I recognise the comments. I also recognise that the HMI said that it considerably ameliorated the criticism from the Daniel Morgan independent panel in relation to the communication between the panel and the Met. And I think it said it could have been better, but it wasn't malicious. And it wasn't in any way intended to disrupt or delay the work of the panel itself. So, but yes, we accept that we need to make sure that any panel that is empowered to look at anything in relation to Met Police does get the proper cooperation. We now have in place a unit that will do that, and I'd point to actually current situation. We've got the Dame Ailish Angelini non-statutory inquiry looking into the circumstances of Wayne Couzens' employment, and then going wider in phase 2. I meet with her In fact, I met with her just 2 days ago. I meet with her on a very regular basis to make sure that she's getting everything she needs. We've appointed a liaison chief superintendent who works full-time to make sure that they are getting everything that they need. And I'm very happy to say, and I'm sure she won't mind me saying, that she's very pleased with the cooperation she's had so far from the Met. We've provided thousands of documents to her already. So I believe we're in a much better place in relation to that now. And I think, you know, what's going on now is the best evidence of that. The same was also true of Baroness Casey, but of course Baroness Casey was put in place by the previous commissioner herself.
So I think you answered my second question, but just to clarify, because back in July last year, Marine Ahmed asked DSC Gray, who would be responsible within the Met for ensuring future panels have an easier working relationship. At that time, she was unable to give an answer, but I think you just said that a superintendent is now in place to ensure that things work out.
But our learning is quite simply that somebody needs to be responsible for that day-to-day engagement. So we have a chief superintendent who personally leads on that one, and that's the model that we will follow from now on.
Thank you, and I commend you for that. Thank you.
Thank you. We're now moving on to stop and search, and questions will be started by Assembly Member Prince, please.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, to you, Sir Stephen. The Home Secretary has recently lifted restrictions on the use of Section 60 stop and search powers, lowered the seniority of officers who can authorise its use, and removed the need to notify communities in advance. What impact do you expect these changes will have on London?
Thank you. We are more sparing now than we used to be in the use of Section 60 declarations, and we've always tried to make sure that the community is aware of it, if not in advance. We tend to use them when we have had serious violence occur. And we obviously publicise that, and we've publicised the fact that Section 60s are in place. And as you'll be well aware, Section 60s, the number of stops actually form a remarkably small percentage of the total stop and searches. It's less than 1% of our total stop and searches come from a Section 60 authorisation. We still require an inspector who can put the authority in place to contact a superintendent at a fairly early stage. We do that for a very practical reason, which is that if you put a Section 60 in place, there's been a problem, and you need to deploy extra resources into the area to deal with that problem. And an inspector won't always have the authority to get those extra resources because of the size of the place and the busyness, but a superintendent will do. Therefore, a superintendent's told about it pretty quickly, so that we make sure that if we've got a Section 60 because, for example, someone's been stabbed, we can put extra resources, and that superintendent has the authority to bring them in, so that it's not a toothless tiger. It's not just going through the motions. It actually does deploy officers and make a difference on the streets.
Thank you very much. Deputy Mayor, what will your comments on that question be?
I don't know why today I can't remember to put my microphone on.
Well, I'd happily repeat it if
no,
you like.
I heard you. I just forgot to put my microphone on. I don't think there's going to be any changes in London in relation to the announcement from the Home Secretary, because Metropolitan Police piloted this, and as Sir Steve has already pointed out, that some of the things that are no longer required nationally are still in place in London. For example, engagement with the community when a Section 60 goes in. Authorisation, the Met isn't allowing extensions. It will always have to be, a new authority is going to have to be sought after, I think it's after 15 hours. And actually, since the last, I think, 2 years, you've seen a reduction in the number of Section 60s and a reduction in the number of searches under Section 60. So I don't think there will be a significant change to the way in which the Metropolitan Police uses Section 60s.
Thank you, that's helpful. Do you agree with the Deputy Mayor, do you agree with the findings of the IOPC's National Learning Report to stop and search, and what changes do you believe are needed to improve police practice?
The IOPC National Learning Report came off the back of learning recommendations on stop and search as well, which the Metropolitan Police had already accepted the recommendations, and a number of the recommendations were already being enacted via the Mayor's Action Plan on Trust and Confidence, but also Sir Steve's delivery group around trust and confidence. So best use of stop and search, importance of training, importance of communication, and importance of understanding the impact on minority ethnic communities in London. All of those are in train, and again, we need to see what the impact's going to be. But I know you're going to come on to questions about the Mayor's Action Plan.
Okay. And Sir Stephen, do you want to add to that at all?
I'm happy to add a little bit to it. Yes, I mean we found the National Learning Report very helpful. It talks about use of intelligence to make sure that searches are as far as possible intelligence led. So we looked at our own intelligence system to make sure it's accurate and gives officers timely information. It talks about use of force, and we've made a number of changes in terms of our use of force. And you'll be aware of our review of handcuffing to remind officers in particular that each incident is a one-off, and handcuffing is not a sheep dip approach. We've also improved our electronic offer so that someone who's stopped and searched can now get an email to their email address if they want to give it to us with a copy of the stop and search on there to save them having to go to the police station. And we've also put an automatic link for the officers from the stop and search form they fill in, the E5090, to take them to a use of force form to remind them that often stop and search will involve use of force, and they need to fill both of those indicators in so that we can gather performance management information in relation to that. As you know, very widespread use of body-worn video in stop and search. Over 97% of our stop and searches have live body-worn video running, and combining that with our public encounter panels, who are empowered to look, members of the community who are empowered to review stop and search videos to make sure that they see the quality of the encounter, and when they don't, they can raise that with us, and we can look at that and see whether the officer needs extra guidance. So I think I could go on about the training also that we deliver at training school and across the organisation in relation to stop and search and the need for it to be done in a professional manner. But I think we've responded well to the national learning, and we're grateful for the report.
I'm glad you raised the point of body-worn video, because I was going to come to that. There was a period where there was a problem with, I won't say members of the public, but certain bodies such as SMBs were not being permitted to view the body-worn camera evidence. Has that now been sorted?
I think it has been sorted. I think it was a data issue, and it's been sorted out. Yes, and I know for a fact that a number of police encounter panels and other groups regularly see body-worn video from officers. We also now require our supervisors to dip sample officers' body-worn video on a regular basis and offer learning if they see anything that they don't like. And we also look at electronically, remotely, we look at the number of officers who are doing stop and search, and we also challenge those that aren't doing very many. And the reason for that is if they're not doing very many or none, when they do one, the chances are they'll probably not be as professional as we want it to be. We need people doing it regularly and doing it well.
It's like when not the current one, but the one the commissioner before actually arrested someone and got the caution wrong because he hasn't had much practice, obviously.
No comment on that.
The issue of body-worn video was sorted September 2020, and it's community monitoring groups that have been viewing them, and they have viewed over 300, and there have been learning opportunities coming out of them which have gone back into the Met. So it's not only sorted, it's working at the moment in terms of community monitoring groups looking at body-worn video and being able to put back into the Met learning opportunities.
That's helpful. So back to you, Sir Stephen, if I may. Are you content with the positive outcome rate from stop and search?
I would like it to be. I would like it to be higher, but we are realistic about the positive outcome rate, which sort of skirts around 26, 27, 28%. Sometimes goes a little bit higher. Sometimes comes down. There's no doubt that there looks to me to be a correlation between the number of stop and searches that officers do and the positive outcome rate. We've never put a target, well, I say never, in my time back in the Met, we've never put a target in relation to stop and search numbers for officers. It finds a natural level, which is around about between 18 and 22,000 stop and searches per month. There is always, being frank, we all know this, a tension between this. We seize 400 weapons a month through stop and search. It's an effective tactic. but it needs to be deployed professionally. It needs to be deployed in an intelligence-led way in response to crime trends, and not as a blanket approach.
But just for clarification, you do accept, or you have just said, correct me if I'm wrong, because I would not want to put words in your mouth, that there is a direct correlation between stop and search and knife crime. Would you say that? I don't. Actually, you didn't say that. So can I ask you that question?
I said there was 400 weapons a month seized. I would say there is a direct link between the number of stop and searches we do, police visibility on the streets. I believe there's a deterrent effect. Yes. But there is a lot of academic debate about these issues, a huge amount, just as there is about the number of police officers and crime levels. It seems to be something that nobody ever quite agrees on. But I don't know how else we would recover 400 weapons a month without stop and search. We are I said this last time, I think, we are continually pushing scientists in the Home Office and elsewhere to come up with the remote search device. Yeah. That means we wouldn't have to lay hands on people, but I'm afraid it's, at the moment, viewed as a holy grail. Just too difficult technologically to do. It would be great if we could get it.
Thank you, that's very helpful. So moving to you now, Deputy Mayor. I'll ask you the same question. Are you content with the positive outcome rate for stop and search?
So I agree with Sir Steve that, we monitor these figures every month. It does knock around 26, 27, 28% at the moment. That is a significant improvement in, I think, over the last 2 years, when I think we, at one point, were below 20%. So it's good that it's increased. Like Sir Steve says, it needs to be higher. What the right level is difficult to, there's no particular target on that, but I would like to see that a bit higher in terms of positive outcomes.
Do you accept that there is a direct correlation between stop and search and knife crime?
As I don't really have much more to add than Sir Steve said, which is stop and search is an effective police power that, when used professionally and in an intelligence-led way, can be really effective. 400 weapons off the street is not to be, it's not to be sneezed at. Those are 400 weapons that weren't able to be used whatever time of day that they were taken off the street. I've always supported stop and search. The question is to make sure it's professional, intelligence-led and supported by the community.
Do you then regret, Deputy Mayor, that in 2016, that against my advice, yourself, the Mayor, actually reduced the amount of stop and search, and as a direct correlation to that, knife crime went through the roof? Do you now regret that, and do you now regret the lives that were lost because of your incompetence?
I really think that is just... The first thing I should say is the ability to direct the police in operational use of police powers is not one that I have or the Mayor has. Every single stop and search is an individual decision of a police officer. So the premise of your question is wrong.
It's not. I'm afraid the Mayor made quite a big thing. When I suggested to the Mayor that to reduce stop and search would be foolish based on the information I had, because, as you know, I worked with Mopac before I became an Assembly member, he actually mocked me and said that I was wrong, and that both he and the then Prime Minister, who was also wrong, said that they should reduce stop and search. And I can show you a diagram here that shows you the direct correlation between the reducing in stop and search and the increasing in knife crime. And as I say, do you regret the lives that have been lost as a result of the decisions that you and the Mayor took and the guidance that you gave to the Metropolitan Police?
Do you know, I'm not going to make political points out of individuals who've lost their lives and families who are in grief. You know, and the committee know, how seriously the Mayor and I and the Metropolitan Police have taken the serious violence on the streets of London, how seriously we have worked to bring down violence, set up the Violence Reduction Unit, focused on teen homicides. And I'm not going to make political points out of that. I find it quite distasteful that you are. And in terms of stop and search, I and the Mayor have been absolutely clear that stop and search is a useful police power, should be used and used in a professional and effective way.
Well, I'm glad, Deputy Mayor, that you've now seen sense and that you've now changed your opinion. But you should have to spend time, like I do, with those mothers who have lost their children's lives as a direct result of your inaction. Can you ask your next
question? Are you going to ask that last question, Dee? Okay.
On that one. And the last question is, which I'll ask to Sir Stephen, What action is the Met taking to increase confidence in the use of stop and search among children and black Londoners, please?
Well, clearly that's a really important point. We know that statistically young people and young black people in particular are highly dubious about stop and search and have a low level of trust in policing. Interesting, you asked that question. Operation Sceptre, which is a national knife crime campaign, was carried out across England and Wales last week. And I just wanted to bring out that in London alone, we gave 203 school presentations in relation to the dangers of knife crime and carrying knives, and explained why we do stop and search. That engaged with 15,000 young people across London. We also, in that same period, recovered 288 knives in that week through Sceptre alone. But we are working hard. If you go onto our website, you can find a lot of material that explains stop and search. It explains people's rights to stop, and when they are stopped and searched, it explains why we do it. And our training now for new officers in particular, who go right onto the front line and therefore are doing a lot of the stop and search, involves reverse stop and search, whereby they will be subject themselves to stop and search by members of the community, and it shows members of the community why we're doing it. So it's a win-win. It shows the members why we're doing it and gives them the understanding, but it also shows the officers how it feels to be stopped and searched as much as you can in an academic situation. So we are very keen that youngsters understand the reasons why we do it, and don't feel that it is an oppressive measure aimed at any one part of the community. Of course, there are difficulties with that, because we know that if you are a young black person in London, or in fact a young black man in London, you are 3 times more likely to be stopped than a young white man. Interestingly, the national figure is 7 times more likely. London, it's 3 times more likely. And I would again say, and I've said this on many occasions, I know it's slightly controversial, that has to be read in the context of the fact that young black men are more likely to be the victims of violent crime than young white men, and in some crime types are more likely to be perpetrators as well. And we have to, if we're going to say we're going to do stop and search on intelligence base, so we also have to look at the statistics and aim them in that direction as well.
Yeah, thank you for that. I actually do work with organisations against gang crime, but I'm also doing some work at the moment with mothers who have lost their children as a result of knife crime, and it might be beneficial if I could perhaps have a contact in your department to maybe do some joint work on this.
Perhaps we can take that offline. Yeah. Okay. Assembly Member Carrot.
Chair, sorry, before we go, can we just... Is this the standard where we're going to set?
I'm going to bring you in next.
Where an Assembly member insults a guest in this way. It really is quite unacceptable.
No, can we stop? I will bring you in after Assembly Member Garrett.
Thank you, Chair. It was a question actually following on from this question, my colleague, about the necessity but also the sensitivity around stop and search. And I'm sure you're aware there's a lot of work being done in my constituency in Croydon to try to do a lot of work between the police and the community, which I've seen at first hand, and actually it really brought home to me recently how effective that's been. I think it's quite slow work, and so week by week it's quite hard to see a difference. But we had the Violent Crime Task Force in Croydon, and I think it would be fair to say there was a notable contrast between the sort of central resource coming into Croydon and how they approached the stops and searches that they were doing versus the way I think that the local officers in Croydon have become accustomed to doing it. And certainly the community meeting that I was at a couple of weeks ago, that came out quite strongly. So my question really is how, I mean, you're nodding along, so you're obviously aware of the work that's happening in Croydon. How are you looking to expand that approach, which to my impression, seems to be working much better at trying to achieve that balance that we want to see?
Yeah, I mean, it's been, as you say, it's slow sounds critical. It has to take its time to build up the relationship. So we've been watching it for some while. It has been a local initiative by the local BCU commander, and I give him great credit for that. We are monitoring it, and we are looking as to see whether or not we can roll it out elsewhere. These things sometimes are quite delicate flowers and grow in some parts of the city, don't necessarily transport all that well elsewhere. It depends on a lot of different circumstances, but we are looking at what best practice we can take and move elsewhere. You will find actually most BCUs have something similar. They're not all as effective as what we're seeing in Croydon, which I've had an awful lot of good reports upon. But most places are doing something similar. The number of contacts we have with the community is something I'm not very good at putting across, I guess, but we have huge numbers of contacts. Maybe when we get to crime prevention, we'll go through a few of those initiatives. But every BCU has something to reach out to youngsters. So, for example, we do a ride-along scheme, and we get 400 requests a month for people to come and ride along with officers. We have the walk and talk scheme, where women officers will go out with women from the community and talk to them about how they feel and how they feel safe or unsafe. And there's a lot of good work done there as well. So there's an awful lot of community interaction that's going on, and a lot of it is about knife crime, is about violence, and is about stop and search, because it's such a it's a tension point for us. We know that.
Thank you. Assemblymember Ahmed.
Thank you, Chair. And the point I was making was that I really don't see why guests would come. They don't have to if they're going to be insulted in the way that Assemblymember Prince chose to do. I really find that very distasteful and unnecessary, and I hope that we don't do that, and that's not the standard that we set in this committee or across the board in the London Assembly. So my first question... thank you. My first question, Acting Commissioner. In March this year, Assemblymember Moema asked a number of questions relating to the Child Q case, which has been well reported. Sadly, this week we have reports of a similar case of a young girl of mixed race, again on her period, who was strip searched with only male officers present. The child had no responsible adult present, despite the fact that it was known that she was autistic. And we hear that her head was smashed on the floor. Her mother reports that she has since attempted to take her own life. In what way are you assuring the safety and dignity of children who are taken into custody if safeguarding is supposed to be absolutely primary?
Well, thank you for the question. I have to be. I think the chairperson knows this. I have to be somewhat careful about what I say about some of these incidents, because where they've been referred to the IOPC, Independent Office of Police Conduct, I'm already on a warning from the IOPC in relation to comments I've made here about previous incidents, and they warn me that I can only respond in certain parameters. But I would say that I recognise the incident you're talking about. I'm not sure that the facts are still to be determined. Let me say that as far as we're concerned, and it's good that the IOPC will be working to do that. And if there is learning there, we will find it. Clearly, the Child Q situation, I can talk about a little bit more, should not have happened. We were clear about that from the very early days of that the officers didn't follow guidance, didn't follow their training, and the IOPC are looking at that as well. We have refreshed very vigorously inside the organisation the awareness and the training for the sort of searches that you are talking about. So now anyone so have to be carried out in a police station. Anyone suggesting they carry it out has to get the authority of an inspector before the search can now be carried out. It's absolutely clear that they can only be carried out with the same sex present, and no one from the opposite gender should be present at all, and that an appropriate adult should be in the same room as the person being searched. And we have very clear guidance issued to our officers down to, and I'll not go into the detail, it's not particularly pleasant, but down to how the search should be carried out to try to reduce the intrusion and the indignity of the search. As the Deputy Mayor says, all this is only as good as, is it actually carried out? We, as I say, we've raised the authority level. We've made it very clear to officers. We are retraining officers in relation to this as well. But I just want to be very clear to people here and to the public why we do these searches. So these are people coming into custody. And in terms of young women and girls being brought into custody and subjected to these search, we are talking about a handful each year. A very small minority of people go through this kind of search. And why do we do that? We do it to keep that individual safe and to keep officers safe as well. So we're looking primarily for weapons or drugs. And the reason we're looking for those weapons, if we don't do the search, and we don't do it as a routine, as I say, it's like a handful of occasions we do this, when we have reasonable suspicion to believe that the search is necessary, we carry the search out to recover drugs and to recover a weapon, which might be used to attack a police officer. But
Sir Stephen, sorry, if I could interrupt you there for a moment.
Yeah.
I don't think there is any question about the search itself. It's about how it's carried out and who is present.
Right, okay.
So clearly there are safeguarding issues, and you talked about the child Q case, which we can now discuss, that there were serious safeguarding issues there. So what I'm hoping that you're going to say is that once it goes to the level that you're talking about for permission to do it, that there is a checklist of who needs to be present at that search to ensure that it happens.
Yes. Well, I thought I'd done that. It can only be the same gender that's present. And the,
what about an appropriate adult?
Well, I did say that.
Right. Okay. My apologies.
Right.
Thank you. So
They
there
have-
is a checklist.
They have to be in the same. Yeah. Sorry, I've obviously not put my points
You
across.
did,
There is
Sir
a very
Steve.
clear checklist which goes down to how the officer actually carries out the search, physically how they carry it out, be graphic, whether they're allowed to stoop to look, but they are not allowed to bend down. It goes to that level of detail to try to reduce any intrusion this is a very intrusive search, and officers need to understand that, and the vast majority do understand this and do it sensitively. I can't actually talk about everything in Child Q because it's still being investigated by the IOPC. 4 of my officers are under investigation for it, but we have learned lessons from that. And on every case of these searches, we have to put on a Merlin report, which effectively is to bring if the child is not already brought to notice of social services, to bring the child to notice so that people are aware of there is a concern for this child's welfare, which is effectively why the search has been carried out in the first place.
Can you? I mean, these cases are coming up. Are you aware of any other ongoing cases? Obviously, you can't name them, but are there? Should we be expecting more to come to light that you may be aware of?
Yes.
Okay.
There's one more that I'm aware of that I simply can't talk about at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor, how are you ensuring that these types of searches are carried out properly and with the necessary oversight and scrutiny from your office?
Thanks. There's a number of ways. I mean, there's the oversight mechanisms, the oversight board. At the last oversight board, we had a long and detailed discussion around lessons that needed to be learnt out of the Child Q case, but also on an annual basis, we look at use of force. I look at use of force, and MOPAT looks at use of force, which, although strip searching, and I know there's permeations of that, it's not completely the right term, is not deemed as a use of force. We always take the figures and the data for those searches that are carried out as well. So there's that oversight there. We also have the independent custody visitors who have also previously flagged up issues with strip searches in custody, which have been fed back to the Metropolitan Police. And I know we're coming on to the Mayor's Action Plan, but one of the recommendations in the Mayor's Action Plan, and actions, I should say, from the Mayor's Action Plan, was to do a review of custody records. That review has taken place and is ongoing, and one of the things that's come out of it is some difficulties around data collection, around strip searches, as well as other types of data collection. So the independent custody visitors are also important in this area. And the last thing is having oversight and some scrutiny around the appropriate adults. And there is an issue around appropriate adults in the numbers of appropriate adults in London and whether they are quickly able to come to custody or not. And we are having discussions with that, not just with the Metropolitan Police, but with boroughs and the NHS as well. And there is a fourth point which it's gone out of my head in terms of scrutiny, but I'll come back to it. Okay. Oh, sorry, the last bit is around the previous HMIC report around some of the issues around that's coming out is actually young people being held in custody overnight. And I know that's not around strip searches, but again, it's about what is happening to young people in custody, and that oversight is there. So part of the child protection oversight we have previously and looking at what is happening to young people, how long are they being kept in custody as well.
Thank you, Chair. My apologies. I think I may have strayed into my colleague Assembly Russell's questions. My apologies to Assembly Russell for that.
You did. That's happened a couple of times today, so if you could try not to, colleagues, that would be good. Assembly Member Prince wants to say something briefly.
Thank you. Just as a point of personal explanation. First of all, may I start by saying that I do believe in the heat of the moment, Sophie, I referred to your incompetence, and I apologise unreservedly for that. I meant to say inactivity, so I do apologise because that was rude of me and not becoming. I don't actually apologise for the veracity because it's something that I'm very emotionally attached to, because I made it very clear to the Mayor at the time this would be a disaster, and it was a disaster, and all the facts and figures show that. But as I say, unreservedly apologise for referring to you as incompetent. That was wrong of me.
Okay, thank you for apologising. Do you accept that apology?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Right, if we can go on. Thank you, Assembly Member Prince. Can we go on to Assembly Member Russell now, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Now, the National Stop and Search Learning Report that came out in April from the IOPC said officers were undermining the legitimacy of stop and search, including by conducting searches on weak grounds that left people feeling targeted, using unnecessary force and causing situations to escalate that could have been managed in a more cooperative way. So just taking that as a piece of context, I'm going to ask the question that has been strayed into, just in case there's anything extra that you want to add to it. So the question is, in what ways have you held senior Met officers to account for the use of stop and search powers through the MOPAC MPS Oversight Board and the Disproportionality Board, and what has been the outcome of this, and how have you addressed the IOPC findings through these boards, like the bit that I just read out?
I mean, I've already talked a bit about what we're doing on this. I mean, I haven't talked about the Disproportionality Board, so not to repeat things that we've already been talking about.
Absolutely.
The Disproportionality Board is looking at and scrutinising the figures around stop and search, and not just stop and search, but also disproportionality across the criminal justice system. Actually, the Youth Justice Action Plan comes to it as well. So we are looking across the piece. This is not just about use of police powers, but it's across the criminal justice system as well. One of the things that we've done is that we've had a report from the Metropolitan Police in terms of how they are enacting the recommendations from not just that report, but also the learning recommendations from the IPC, which was specifically focused on the Metropolitan Police. And we have kicked off a piece of work which is really coming from the recommendations of a number of people around, you need to explain what is happening around the disproportionality and stop and search in London. So we have a task and finish group that is looking at that. How do you explain that disproportionality? And if you cannot explain it, what are we going to do about it? And quite a complicated piece of work has been kicked off around that, so that Sir Steve is absolutely right. You're 3 times more likely in London to be stopped and searched as a young black person, if you are black in London. The question for me is, why is that? And that's a piece of work that we're doing through the Disproportionality Board.
Thank you. Now, in March 2022, the Mayor said at MQT. I'm committed to strengthening this, community oversight is an important part of my wider oversight of the Metropolitan Police Service. I am committed to strengthening this, and work is underway to overhaul the community monitoring structures to ensure they are as effective as they possibly can be. So what progress has been made in overhauling stop and search community monitoring structures?
The community monitor, there's two things. There's the community monitoring groups. We now have a steering group that is looking at piloting in 5 boroughs a new way of doing community monitoring, with the first borough being Hackney coming. We thought that was appropriate given the Child Q case and the fact that one of the things that's happening in response to the Child Q case is the borough commander and the Hackney Council are working on this, so we are working with them in terms of putting together a more diverse, representative group around community monitoring. So that is underway. And of course, the other thing is that we, a while back, we unlocked, with the Metropolitan Police, the issue around body-worn video to make sure that body-worn video has been seen by community monitoring groups. And we, as I said earlier, we know that that is the case. Over 300 times that clips have been looked at, with, I think, over 90 learning opportunities, recommendations coming out of it. So that is work that is underway. There's more to be done. And I think I've said before at this committee, COVID did get in the way of some of this work because we put a tender out to help us with this work. We have now, we're just on the point of beginning the contract with Black Thrive to do a wider piece of work, not just on the 5 pilots that I've just talked about.
So these pilots that you've talked about, what's the kind of timescale for the pilots being reviewed?
We're just putting them together at the moment, so we'll get them up and running, and I can come back to you on the timescale in terms of that.
That would be very helpful. Thank you. Assistant Commissioner, Acting Commissioner. Apologies. I just want to pick up on another stop and search case, the Bianca Williams and Ricardo dos Santos case. Do you regret dismissing the allegations made by Bianca Williams and Ricardo dos Santos in July 2020 in light of the IOPC's findings? Sorry.
Do I regret dismissing? Again, I have to be careful with my language because the IOPC have already sent me a letter about this, and I've been under investigation as a result of it. But I don't believe that I did dismiss it. What I said, I'm just going to say what I said again before, I'm afraid, which was factual. 2 separate officers reviewed what we had at the time, which was what evidence we had, and didn't find anything wrong. That was the case. The IOPC have gone on and they have found things that are wrong, and we now accept that it's going to a misconduct and gross misconduct tribunal.
As you say, yes, at the time you said to us it was looked at, it was reviewed twice by 2 separate teams of officers from professional standards. Neither team saw anything wrong with it. The former commissioner also said any officer worth their salt would have stopped that car that was being driven in that manner. And yet, as you say, the IOPC is now has now reviewed it, and the 5 officers are facing gross misconduct proceedings.
I don't think they're all facing gross misconduct.
Oh,
I don't think they are, but just to be clear.
Okay,
I wouldn't want to
spook
them. So.
Some are, okay. But I think what I'm asking is that's quite a discrepancy in terms of perception of what was happening. Do you think that do you think there's anything that needs to change culturally in the Met that would avoid that kind of discrepancy in the future?
I'm sorry, but I can't talk about the case itself because I will just upset Michael Lockwood again. Clearly, if it's important that the police have an independent oversight. quite clearly. That's the IOPC, and if they see there's something wrong, then it has to be tested, and it will be tested in a misconduct and gross misconduct setting, and we will see what the results are, and if we need to learn from the results, we will do.
So
my worry about it is, of course, that this puts officers off doing stop and search, and we've just had a long debate about the value of doing stop and search, and it's that balance that we have to find as leaders in the organisation, but we accept fully that the IOPC have their job to do, and we support them doing it.
There's also the balance around Londoners having trust and confidence in the police when there are cases like the Bianca Williams and Ricardo dos Santos case, where it's they experienced a terrifying experience, and that seems to be another example of disproportionality in stop and search.
Those are your words, not anyone else's yet.
Okay. Do you believe that the IOPC should offer advice on the balance between senior officers responding openly and transparently to scrutiny bodies?
I have a letter from Michael Lockwood which purports to tell me what that balance is, but I'd be very. I think he may have sent a copy to the chairperson. I'm not sure. It's a tricky area. I want to come here and tell you what I think, but I don't want to come here and bring the make the casual reader think the organisation's not caring about what the IOPC is saying and is trying to influence people, because I certainly wasn't trying to do that. But I do think we have to speak and try and find a middle path. I tried to stick to fact, and I think I did in the Bianca Williams case. I think the IOPC disagree.
Well, perhaps we can ask the IOPC for some guidance on that.
It'd be good if you
Actually,
could.
it would be very interesting. Chair, there's one tiny point of clarification that I wanted to ask Sir Stephen, following up from something that Assemblymember Desai asked earlier. It's a 3-word question. Could I just please, with your indulgence,
we have got about 20
put that?
minutes left.
I'll take 2 seconds.
Well,
do we know which event on the 13th of November had fines issued?
No,
the leaving do, the flat, or both?
Well, I'll be candid with you. I know, but I'm not sure I'm allowed to tell you.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Right, I'm mindful of the time. I've got a couple of questions on this. Can you tell me, I'm thrilled to bits with body-worn cameras. I've always thought that they were a brilliant idea. Do the police officers keep cameras on when they're chasing vehicles? Or whatever the technical term is.
Well, I mean, they probably they will do in some circumstances, but it depends on the grade of the car. So many cars already have their own on-dash video, which is much more effective in terms of seeing what's going on in a pursuit situation. The body-worn video, because it's worn here.
I understand. I'm more, and I'm not referring to any case at all.
No.
It's just that sometimes if there is a chase, and for example, if people were going left and right and then left and right, etc., it would mean that police officers would think that they should follow that vehicle because it maybe looked as if it was up to no good, is my point. And I'm just wondering whether, therefore, it's common for cameras to be in those pursuit vehicles. It's in a pursuit vehicle, there will be an on-dash camera which will be recording the movements of the vehicle in front. But in a normal vehicle, in one of our normal cars on BCU, then no, it wouldn't have that, and therefore the body-worn video would be the only thing that would have it, and it wouldn't be terribly effective. Because as a car turns, the body. Yeah, I'm mindful of various issues that. So anyway, I'll leave it at that because I don't want to go into any particular case. But can you tell me why is there such a disconnect, Sir Steve, between the IOPC and independently legally qualified chairs when referrals for gross misconduct are made? The Guardian recently reported that only 1 in 10 result in dismissal, and they are properly legally qualified chairs. So why does the IOPC make one decision and legally qualified chairs make a different one?
With all due respect, I think you have to ask Michael Lockwood that question.
I will ask. I know him. I will ask him for sure. Do you know the answer to that, Deputy Mayor? It just seems quite bizarre that it's only 1 in 10 from those that are legally qualified to decide whether gross misconduct has occurred. So I will certainly be writing on behalf of the committee to Michael Lockwood on that one. We've also got the IOPC coming to one of our meetings, which maybe I'll ask him. Right, okay, we're now moving to the Mayor's Action Plan. I'm mindful we've got 20 minutes, so I'll steam through these, if I may. Deputy Mayor, are you content with the progress made in implementing the actions in the Mayor's 2020 Action Plan for Transparency, Accountability and Trust in Policing? And what has been the biggest challenge and where is more work needed?
I think overall there's been good progress, but as I've already said today, we've not gone as quickly as we wanted to in terms of the community engagement review because of COVID and problems with that. We've had some really, there's been really good, in terms of the work that the Met has done, also flowing out of the Mayor's Action Plan into the Met Zone Plan. There's been some really good progress. For example, we quickly published, one of the actions was to have a race equality audit, which was bringing together all the figures and data, which was then asked from the community. That has quickly been published, and there is a dashboard on that in the MOPAC website, which has been, many people have said they've used and also have found it very, very helpful. In terms of and the challenge has been the community engagement work, actually, in terms of reviewing it. That's been the biggest challenge, but we've come through that. We have Black Thrive now helping us to undertake that work. Again, I've already talked about this, but again, the custody reviews, the review of the custody records has been a real, I think it's been an action that has made a considerable difference. It is also an action, I'm told, is not taking place across the country, and I know the Independent Custody Visitors Board has looked at this, and also the Police and Crime Commissioner, who is leading on independent custody visitors for nationally. I've spoken to her about the work that we're doing in London on this, and she has asked, can we know more, because that feels very, feels like London is leading on that. We've also had some good progress in terms of, Sir Steve's talked about it to some extent already, in terms of stop and search and training, in terms of community-led training. That is, and in terms of also making sure that the community is inputting into the curriculum of the Metropolitan Police as well. Some really good progress. There's more that's got to be done. Yes, overall we are making progress. But again, I always come back to, we can tick off the actions, we can deliver the plan, but for me it's... Yeah. Has it made a difference? And it's far too early to say.
Okay, so Steve, are the officers understanding why we're doing this? Are they engaging with it and happily engaging with it because they know the issues?
I think most officers who work in London will understand the issues. It's one of the most diverse cities in the world. We are an increasingly diverse workforce, certainly with gender balance. Our recruitment is going in the right direction. It's slow, but it is going in the right direction in relation to diversity. And the more diverse the workforce, I think the more the understanding is there. So during 21-22, we saw 23% of our new recruits coming from Black, Asian and minority ethnic backgrounds. But the downside is only 4.4% were black. So we're seeing a big increase in Asian and other ethnic minorities. The black recruits coming into the organisation is improving in numbers, but it's not going up as fast as we want it to. Although I think the Met is still in a situation where we have in our ranks nearly or over half all of the black officers in England and Wales work in the Metropolitan Police Service. I just, if you don't mind, I'd just like to go back to the previous question you asked. What about the progress from the action plan? So the Mayor wrote to the previous Commissioner and praised the significant progress that has been made by both the MPS and MOPAC, and said that the work of one of our commanders and of the delivery group is to be commended. So I also agree it's about moving the dial, not just ticking boxes. But we have been assiduous in following up on the action plan and I think we are starting to see some results. So we're seeing better recruitment, we're seeing better progression through the ranks, and we put in place a number of measures to improve progression of black officers through the rank, including extra funding from the Mayor's office, which has been effective. Every single one of our BCUs has got a career development officer who specifically focuses on diversity issues and improving the progression of diverse people through the rank structure. The Met personally has worked with the Home Office and the College of Policing to redesign day one recruiting for the police service, because we saw that there was disparity in the people who were being successful, and we have worked with them to redesign that, and we now see very, very little disparity between white and black candidates as they come forward on day one into the police service. And I think Chair, we've got an outreach team of 50 officers working across London solely with the aim to try and improve the diversity of our new recruits, and they are having some effect. The Deputy Mayor talked about effect. We've had expressions of interest from 16,000 individuals, from 6,400 individuals, and it's converted to 700 applications so far from members of the black community, which is good news. Good,
that is good. Sophie, you referred to engagement. You were talking about the handbook of engagement, that you weren't. Okay, so Steve, the Met's handbook of engagement was due to be completed and published by the spring. Has this been done? Good man, you've got it in your hands. But is it?
So I need to check that and not mislead you that it has been published, but it's certainly finished. There's nothing that says draft on here, and it's been published, and it has, because I saw it on our website today. Yes, it has been published.
It has.
And it's a pretty comprehensive list of how Londoners can get involved with the Met through independent advisory groups, reference groups, encounter panels, ride-along schemes, faith briefings, behind the badge, police volunteers, special constables, etc., etc.
Good.
Quite comprehensive.
Nighttime reading for me.
Yeah.
Jolly good. I'm going to go straight now to Assembly Member Sahota, miss out a couple of my questions until we have to stop.
Thank you, Chair. I think you've already answered one of the questions about how the £1.2 million being used, which the Mayor has given for the promotion of black officers. I think you've already dealt with that, so I won't go through that. This is to the Deputy Mayor. What has been learned from the consultation the London Victims Commissioner undertook with black women, and what recommendations have been made as a result of this work, and what specific findings and actions will be incorporated into the Mayor's refreshed violence against women and girls strategy?
So, you're right, as part of the Mayor's Action Plan, people often focus on trust and confidence in relation to young black men, but actually black women also have similar issues around trust and confidence, and it particularly comes out in their confidence to come forward and report, in particular around domestic abuse or violence against women, when they've been victims of violence against them. So one of the things, Claire Waxman led these round tables. She's early findings are around the importance of friends and neighbours in terms of helping women realise that they're actually a victim of crime and a victim of abuse, and supporting them to report to the police themselves. Cultural barriers making it difficult to disclose to family. Cultural norms making it difficult to leave abusive situations, and they're also, as I've talked about, intergenerational distrust in the police is a particular issue. Victims want a culturally safe space to talk about being abused, and also there's a strong need for one-to-one support and specialist organisations that understand those different culture, understand the cultural sensitivities. Her work has fed into the Violence Against Women and Girls strategy, which we will be publishing shortly, and also her work is also feeding into all of the commissioning that we do for victim services, and the importance of those culturally sensitive and organisations that are led by and for victims, so that there is that cultural sensitivity in delivering support services for minority and minority women.
Thank you. And to you, Sir Stephen, has the new handcuffing policy and training led to a reduction in complaints since its launch in January 2021? And how are you assured the use of handcuffing is justified and properly recorded?
So, thank you. So, So far what we're seeing is, since the new policy has been introduced and publicised through the organisation, we are seeing a reduction in the use of handcuffing. How we monitor it, various ways. So handcuffing is use of force. Therefore, officers have to fill in a use of force form. And we also use that to correlate which stop and search records supervisors should look at. So they will gravitate towards looking at stop and search incidents on body-worn video that have had handcuffs used as well. So we look at that. We also monitor individual officers' use of force. So if a name pops up a lot, we will sort of ask some questions about that. And as they have to submit a use of force form every time they put a handcuff on, we know how much they're doing that. So there is a monitoring regime over that. The emphasis being to officers, there is also an officer and public safety issue here. Again, this is this balance which has come up several times in this meeting. We do not want officers to be too timid in using handcuffs where it's appropriate, but they should only use them where it's appropriate, where they see the threat and risk to themselves or to the individual themselves or to another member of the public. Then handcuffs should be applied. If not, then they should not be. And the emphasis of the training has simply been to say this is not a one-size-fits-all. You must go through the national decision-making model each time you stop somebody and decide whether or not they have to be handcuffed or not.
Yeah, that sounds very sensible, Sir Stephen. Just one more question. According to the most recent MOPAC rape review of black survivors, it said the black survivors continue to be overrepresented when compared to their overall proportion of the population of London. What are you doing to ensure they have access to culturally responsive victim support services?
I think that's a question for me in terms of MOPAC commissioning of services, and that again goes back to our victims' needs assessment, which we will publish alongside the Violence Against Women and Girls strategy, and also the work of the Independent Victims Commissioner feeding into our commissioning. It's not just that feeding into future commissioning, it is already fed into commissioning. So we do already ensure that the money that the Mayor has put in, as well as the Ministry of Justice money, we have organisations that we fund and we commission to provide those services, such as Southall Black Sisters, such as Sister Space as part of victim support services. And we are focused on that, but also with our new responsibility as a Tier 1 authority for domestic abuse accommodation for people, for anybody fleeing abuse. We have been really clear in terms of that commissioning and grant giving that we have specialist services that are culturally sensitive and culturally appropriate.
Yeah, thank you for that, Deputy Mayor. I certainly want to put on record the excellent work Black Sisters do who are in my constituency. Just one more thing, the trust and pleasing is down by in London and nationally by broadly by 20% decrease. Would you agree that we should ensure all Londoners have trust and confidence in our police service, so members of our community feel confident in coming forward to police with information, and to trust them to arrest the dangerous criminals and that cause harm to them?
I mean, absolutely, and that's a key. I know it's a key focus for the acting commissioner. It's a key focus for the mayor, and that's what the action plan was around trust and confidence. Was how do we improve that and increase it? But of course, important. The action plan on trust and confidence is incredibly. Is going to be important, and it should have the impact that we expect. But it's not just about that as well. It's also about basic policing in terms of response, detection, arrests. So we've got to make sure that, and I know Sir Steve is very, very focused on this, that in terms of the response the police give members of the public, that also develops trust and confidence.
Thank you. Were you wanted to comment, Sir Stephen?
Simply to say that yes, it's I hope self-evident that we want as many Londoners as possible to trust the Met, and we appreciate that that's something that's in our part of the tennis court, not theirs. We can't just demand it. We have to prove that we are worthy of it. And we've had incidents where, in recent years, where the public have undoubtedly doubted in some instances, and we have seen a reduction in confidence. I believe that will return. I do believe that because we are a nation which has such oversight of policing. We go through a series of issues, and then we have court case, we have inquests, we have inspection reports, we have IOPC reports. We're held to account here. as somebody earlier said, the meetings are too short to talk about all the good things that the Met does. We talk about the areas where we're concerned. That's perfectly right and perfectly appropriate. But it does sometimes magnify and extend the bad news. And again, I would pay tribute to the officers and staff in the Met, all 43,000 of them. The vast majority come to work to do a good job to protect people, just as they always have done for the last 190 years, and I hope will do for years to come. I would pay tribute to the work that they do, despite the fact that they are getting a lot of knocks at the moment. We've got to get things sorted as well. I've said, this is not just a few bad apples that have caused this. There's wider problems. We're working on those, but we also, as the Deputy Mayor suggests, have to be good at our job. We have to catch more criminals. We have to put more people in front of the courts. Violent crime has been coming down in London. Even if you take out the COVID effect, it has been coming down. Our lethal barrel discharges in London are at a very, very low level compared to historically. We've seen robbery come down. We've seen knife injury victims of young men under 25 come down significantly. That's hard work by police officers and other partners and police staff. We need to do that. We need to be competent at our jobs to gain public confidence.
Yeah, I agree with you entirely, Stephen, and I just want to put on record all the tremendous work for the majority of police officers in London. We just need to guard against those things. When things go wrong, we're out to look out for them. So thank you very much, Sir Stephen.
I think we can all agree with that, and thank you, and our thanks to them as well. There's two more questions, one from me, which is a quick one, and then Assembly Member Devenish is going to ask one question on our final section, because that's only fair. My question is to you, Deputy Mayor. What do you expect the new Commissioner to do differently to the previous one?
I think the Mayor has been very clear, and I have as well here at the committee as well, in terms of what we are looking for in a new Commissioner, which is to be very clear about the extent of the issues that they've got to change and to grapple with within the Met, the cultural change that's got to be improved, and also to have a very clear plan in terms of trust and confidence, engaging with Londoners and bringing Londoners with them. Obviously, we're just at the start of the recruitment process, and I'm not going to comment on that.
No. Okay. Right. We'll see how that goes. Right. Crime prevention. We will come back to, because there's a whole section. But I've asked Assembly Member Devenish to choose his favourite question, so he's going to come to that.
Well, you can probably guess my favourite question, Sir Steve, because I've asked you before. Do you think that we've got enough focus on online crime? And I've been rather concerned that your answers are usually excellent, but you rather downplayed online crime at a couple of previous meetings as a priority. So my question to you, sir, is what is the biggest challenge in preventing online crime? What steps are the Met taking to address this? And do you accept the world has changed in the last 4 or 5 years? And for WhatsApp messages through to online, do you really appreciate, I don't really, because I'm of a certain age as well, that really this is the big issue and it isn't all about bobbies on the beat?
Thank you. It's a very interesting question to finish off with, and I did get the feedback about your views on my previous response on it, and I apologise if it was a bit rubbish. I do realise the world's moved on. You cannot ignore the fact that the world has moved on. We have tried to move on as well, but there is a resourcing issue here. There is a resourcing issue, and there is also a skills issue, and a design of our organisation issue as well. And we do need to think, are we recruiting? So as you know, increasingly we are recruiting graduates only. And if you join without a degree, you have to go through a degree course. So, in a few years' time, all police officers will have a degree. But that does not necessarily mean that they are tech wizards and can work on that area. So yes, there's a huge range of online crime challenges that we need to work on and prevent. So we reported in 21 we reported about 74,000 fraud offences to action fraud, and 28,000 cybercrime offences. We had 2,000. This is just the volume really. We had 2,700 child sexual exploitation referrals from the National Crime Agency. Each one of those is intelligence suggesting someone at an address in London is uploading or downloading indecent imagery of children. Now that is a huge number. Each one of those goes out to our BCUs and is investigated by specialised officers. So we are putting effort into this. It's probably the tip of the iceberg, because increasing use of the dark web, where it's much more difficult to find out what's going on, even increasing use of virtual private networks on mobile phones and on tablets means that much more difficult to crack. And of course, in WhatsApp, again, end-to-end encryption. And we know that more and more providers are moving to end-to-end encryption. And we have been saying to the government and the Home Office for a while, this is a real problem for us in combating online crime. We work very closely with victims and businesses and wider community to put information out there. We work closely with the Child Exploitation Online Protection Command to do that, part of the NCA. We've got a Cyber Choices programme that has been created to help people make informed choices. It's basically, we identify people who are carrying out low-level cybercrime of all ages, but often youngsters, and we put them into a programme that tries to turn them away from illegal use to more positive use of online media. Community Watch project that looks at the spread of cybercrime online. We're working closely with the providers. I think my predecessor often said, that's where a lot of the problem is. We need to the government needs to help us put more pressure onto the providers to try to clean up all of the activity, including fraud, but particularly the sexual offences online. We've got a lot of dedicated units and people doing this. We have people working on the dark web themselves, and you see the result of that sometimes when really, really predatory criminals using the intranet are brought to justice by police services, including ourselves. And we're not even talking yet about use of cryptocurrency and the criminality involved in that, which is a massive area which we are in, but is a very, very complex area, and we're at the start of it. I hope that was better as a response, but
much better.
I'll find out.
Thank you.
Much better, and it's 1 minute past 4, and I know you're both under time constraints. We do thank you for your time. We do always want more time because we do find it really, really useful. So thank you for your time today. Perhaps going forward, if we can squeeze more time out of you, the entire committee would be very grateful. So officially, I'd like to thank our guests for attending this afternoon and for their answers to our questions. Can I ask the committee to note the report, the discussion and the monthly report received from MOPAC? Thank you. Can we also delegate authority to me as chairman in consultation with party group lead members to agree any output arising from the meeting? Thank you. Can I ask the committee to note its work programme and its meeting dates as agreed by the London Assembly at its annual meeting? Thank you, and to note the activity undertaken since our last meeting, namely the informal meeting with the HMICFRS. Thank you. The next meeting of the committee will be held on Wednesday the 8th of June at 10 a.m. in the Chamber, City Hall. I have no other urgent business, so that concludes today's meeting.